now a company called Blacksmith Soft. They're based in the Netherlands, and they're going to talk to us about a fairly new phenomenon for project management called advanced work packaging. And Blacksmith Soft are something of an expert in this area, particularly with the Autodesk solution for this. So right now I'm going to hand over to Mr. Chuck.
Me and my colleague Che, who will be speaking today. Can you guys hear us? Okay, great. Thank you, Peter, for the introduction. So quickly, I'll pass over to my colleague Che Kassouf, who is the VP of Operations at Blacksmith Software, a company specialized in advanced work packaging and workplace planning, which is a methodology being used by the majority of oil and gas and mining companies such as ExxonMobil, Chevron, Rio Tinto. If you're talking about mining, there's a lot of these companies that are already in Nigeria, and this is a methodology for doing what's known as capital projects in oil and gas, energy, and mining. So, Che, if you'd like to please start and introduce yourself, I'll go through the slides.
Thank you, Chuck. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm engineer Che Kassouf. I'm a mechanical engineer originally, and I've been spending the past 25 years going from site to site into construction project. I've been in most of the Middle East country like Saudi Arabia, Emirates, Oman, and Qatar, Bahrain, and also I've been in the CIS country like Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan. I've been also in Germany and in the United States. So I've been almost in various projects across all the world. Most of them are capital projects. And we have implemented in many of them the advanced work packaging. Next slide, Chuck. So who we are as Blacksmith Soft, we are a Dutch company. We provide cloud-based AWP and WFP, which stands for Advanced Work Packaging and Workplace Planning Solution. We have around 50 years of construction experience, extensive knowledge when it comes to capital project and AWP in Kazakhstan, UAE, KSA, Oman, and so on. Next slide. Okay, this is some selection of the project we worked on. So you can see we started the first, let's say, try attempt on workplace planning back in 2008 before it became AWP. And we were able to achieve a good progress, a good monthly project of 8.2%. Just I want you to know that this specific company, their highest performance was 6.1% monthly. To do 8.2 for 4 consecutive months, this was a true achievement. We went through implementing it in various locations. I just want to mention as well the part related to Tengiz back in 2018. We have identified some of the problem that normally exists whenever you have battery limit between various subcontractors, that nobody knew that it was his responsibility to take care of them. And because of AWP implementation, we were able to know that this discrepancy exists, and we highlighted it to the people in charge to make sure they buy the material on time. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, now why the AWP? There are many statistics if you go to Ernst & Young and various statistic company. But one fact is that, you know, the construction activities are, many of them are executed out of sequence. Whenever you have out of sequence execution, it means you are moving your crane back and forth, you are moving your equipment, your tower crane back and forth, and this is really expensive. You are moving your welding machine. This entails to an extension of time requirement. So specifically in the capital project, it is the norm now. Well, okay, We give a 22 months project and we finish it in 36. This is now the norm nowadays. Also, whenever we put a certain budget on a project, we end up going overrun in this budget. This is the fact that we live on today. Now, these problems, they are actually causing the industry around 300 billion a year, which is a huge number. So every time we make a single percentage improvement, it means we are saving around 11 billion for these industry. So this is the idea where if AWP and WFP is properly implemented, it might drive down those out of sequence and extension of time and overruns, and accordingly try to save on these 300 billion a year that the capital industry is suffering from. Next. Okay, now how does this one work? I'll just give you a quick, let's say, history of how this happened. Back in 2004 in Canada, when they start to do those huge projects, the sandy oil project, they noticed that even the best companies that were performing very well on their own, when they give them a big project, they start to have lack of performance. They start to see that the efficiency of their manpower is not good, the delivery of material is not good. So they said, well, because most of them are, let's say, expert construction and they did quite some shutdown project, they noticed that whenever there is a shutdown activity, people do it very well because they do all the prerequisite, all the due diligence before they start the activity. So when they start it, they finish it, because if they don't finish it on time, we are talking about liquidated damage, stoppage of the plant. So it was very critical. So those guys said, why don't we implement the same concept into those big projects? So they decided to divide those projects into smaller projects, mini projects, and then take those mini projects and divide them into activities that could be completed by a crew of 10 or 12 people in 1-2 weeks maximum. In this case, it will be treated as, let's say, a shutdown activity. So we're going to make sure all the drawings are there, all the material are there. If they need tools, it is there. If they need permits, if they need safety training, everything, we make sure it is there, and let's do the implementation. This was back in 2004. They tried this concept on many projects, and they noticed that some of them really had a good improvement, but some of them did not get the proper improvement. So they analyzed them and they noticed if we don't involve the engineering, the procurement, and the mind of the people who are doing the conception of this project into the process, this will not be enough. So we have to bring those on board ahead of time. This is where the concept of AWP, or advanced work packaging, came into the picture. So the advanced work packaging is this whole slide. We start from the project setup. We decide on the path of construction. And of course, this is some interactive planning, because if any changes, like you have to change this path of construction to accommodate, and we do this sort of interaction. We create those mini projects that we're going to be calling them later on construction work areas. And then we go discipline-wise into them, which we're going to call them construction work package. So this is what happened. The advanced work packaging came into this industry to make sure those silos that we are used to, like you have the engineering have their own silo, they don't share the information with the rest, the procurement, the same story, the construction, the same story, and then when it comes to the handover, the same story. Nobody is willing to share this information. All of these, they now integrate together as one big team for the benefit of the overall project. So this is where the AWP came into the picture. Next. Okay, now let's talk a bit of the path of construction. Now, the path of construction, what happens is most of the people, when they started to get, let's say, involved with advanced work packaging, they thought, well, let's go sit on a plot plan, agree with the expert, let's say we're going to start this project from south to north or maybe east to west, and this is our path of construction and we're going to follow it. But the truth is, this is a truly interactive deliverable. So in other words, we have to always revisit those decisions. Sometimes we need to make drastic changes in order to accommodate for the, let's say, dynamic status of the project that is happening from the definition till the engineering, till the procurement, until we arrive to the construction. Next. Okay, what are some of the work phase planning of the advanced work packaging benefit? So on the right-hand side, and this is, by the way, this is from the CII, which is the Construction Institute in the United States, and the COAA, which is the Alberta Construction and Owner chapter. So these two people are, let's say, like the godfather of the advanced work packaging. They have a number of projects and a number of use cases where they have noticed that if properly implemented, it will give us this sort of progresses. Now, the benefit, as we can see, we have safety, we have quality, we have schedule improvement, we have cost improvement, and we have productivity. Now, if you notice, the productivity is around 25% higher. We're going to see why this is happening as we are going through this presentation. Next. Okay, now, if we look at the overall stages, so we have these 4 stages that normally define the workflow of a certain capital project. So we start by preliminary planning design, and then we go to the detailed engineering, and after that we go to the construction execution, and then we pass it over to the people who are going to take this project and operate it. This is where the commissioning happens. So in all of these stages, you notice there are some mini stages underneath them, like you need to have your project definition, you have the engineering and planning, you need to have at least a level 2 schedule to know what are the main milestones. And then at this stage, you need to start to define what are your engineering packages, what are your construction work packages. And of course, the path of construction is a main deliverable at this stage. Now, when we start to detail our conceptual project, we start to do the detailed design, and accordingly, we need to have a level 3 schedule and so on. So all of these steps, if we go through them, we notice that Autodesk Construction Cloud, which is the, let's say, the CDE or the common data environment that is provided by Autodesk, can handle all of those. So when it comes to project definition, providing the schedule, doing the division, all of these can be, in a way or another, handled with Autodesk Construction Cloud. Now, on top of this, what did the Autodesk team provide? They created what we call Autodesk Forge, which is a set of programs that we can talk to the Autodesk environment. By the way, now they call it APS. Earlier, it was called Forge. Now, when we talk to the Autodesk Construction Cloud with these, we will be able to question, like, okay, to ask what is the status of the path of construction, what is the path of the schedule, what are the components of this construction work area, what are the drawing, any pending constraint, any pending RFI. So all of these can be asked using the Autodesk Forge. Now, us as Blacksmith Soft, what did we do? We have utilized the Autodesk CDE, and then whenever we receive a 3D model from any supplier, we place it into the ACC. Whenever we receive information about schedule, we place it into the ACC, and we use our platform in order to communicate those various sources of information in order to provide the proper platform for an advanced work packaging management. Next. Now, if we look, for example, if we are talking about the path of construction, as you can see, every one of those steps, I try to detail it a bit. So you see in this path of construction, you need to know what are the engineering priorities. What are the procurement priorities? And then when they are the X work date, when they are supposed to arrive to site. If you go to the level 4 schedule, for example, you can see here, we need to do the IWP scoping. So in other words, at this stage, we need to be able to create a schedule that can be divided by a bi-weekly, let's say, timestamp for the various requirements. So in this case, we need to know how many IWP do I need, 1,000, 2,000, depending on the man hour of the project. And then we need to create those actual IWP, which are made of many components, which we're going to talk about. And after that, I need to check, are there requirement met, which we call the constraint management or constraint clearance. If you go a bit down, we will reach the level of the construction. And this is where you have a full control over the construction, because you will be able to manage the construction at a bi-weekly timestamp. And accordingly, we'll receive feedback from procurement, feedback from the fabrication, and then you start to clear all of these constraints to make sure you can start. And of course, at a later stage, whenever your project is about 60 or 70% progress, you shift from area-based project control into system-based project control. And this is where the work packaging, system work package, or SWP, come into the image. And accordingly, most of the people who have worked with test pack and PIDs and so on will be familiar with what I'm talking about here. Of course, you need to have all the QC documentation, all the testing proofs, in order to put them in one dossier to have a proper certification of that system to be able to hand it over. Next. Okay, now what does how does our approach differ from the existing, let's say, AWP management system in the market? Number one, we are cloud-based system. So in other words, if you want to implement our system, you don't have to get your own IT administrator, your own servers, your own high-end machines, and so on. None of these is required. So accordingly, you don't need any of these. Number one, if you as a company today you have, let's say, 10 users, after 1 month you want to scale up and say, look guys, everybody is on board, I want to have 100 users. We can do this at a push of a button, because it is scalable and it is cloud-based. If you want to use the old system, you might end up having to buy more powerful machine. You might end up to have a more or a bigger infrastructure in order to accommodate for this. So this is some of the benefit. Also, instant deployment. So in other words, if you need to start using it, we can have it up and ready in less than 15 minutes, as opposed in the legacy approach, you have to have extended deployment time, training, testing of the connections, and so on. Now, the other item is, which is also very important, in many countries, they really have what we call a safe harbor. In other words, you are not allowed to take the data outside of a certain country. So in this case also, we support this one. We can have, let's say, our cloud on the same country that you are in. We can talk with your local ISP and have it available. It is up to date with the industry standard, because it is being cloud and we have so many customers. So any new update that come to the standards, it's always implemented and everybody will benefit from it. We rely a lot on the Autodesk platform API. And just, I want to mention here one thing. Many of the existing, let's say, AWP solution, they might have to reinvent the wheel every time they create a new feature. Like, for example, if they add a constraint management part to their system, they might have to go to certify it and make sure it works with all the security standard in the world and so on. But in our case, because we rely on the Autodesk platform, all of these certification, Autodesk make sure they have them, and they have the highest standard when it comes to security and privacy and so on. So from our side, instead of having to reinvent the wheel, on the contrary, we rely on their APIs, and accordingly, we can provide this. The other item is ACC and Forge are by far the only, let's say, provider that can read more than 80 file formats. So it doesn't matter what source you have, you can still use this system to read the data. Next. Okay, I'm gonna here chime in some of our experience when dealing with AWP, because if you go to the actual documentation, it does not really go to that level of detail, but when you start using it on site, you will get what I mean. So here is an example that this, by the way, is one of the item we worked in Kazakhstan. You can see here that many of the item came as pre-assembled modularized projects. So in other words, instead of having to get the structural steel and stick built it on site, they said, why don't we pre-assemble the rack, put all the electrical, put all the insulation, the piping, everything on this rack, and we send it. Now they did this, and they did it in a fab shop, very efficient, let's say, way of creating those racks. But the problem is they need to transport them. So when you want to transport them, you need to divide it into multiple levels. So you can see here we have the under the level 1 and the level 2. Also, there are some items that can go beyond the capacity of the ship that is moving this specific element. That's why we have the envelope. So now, if you want to divide, let's say, this specific pre-assembled rack based on the AWP approach, you end up having to have one CWP for the orange level, another CWP for the red level, a third CWP for the envelope item that are going to come, and whatever you want to put on the underground is a fourth CWP. And of course, when it arrives to site, you do the stacking. So you put the level, the red level over the orange level, you put them together on site, and then you move it to specific location. All of these, it shows you how versatile the advanced work packaging could be to handle all sort of project, whether a stick build, whether fabrication sort of project, whether underground infrastructure and so on. It is that versatile to handle. Next. Now, I just try to put some, let's say, workflow which really explain what are the various steps that a person. So this workflow is actually one of the workflow I use on a specific project. So we can see here, for example, on top, we have to have the construction work package released from the designer, where he tell me, look, I have all the IFC drawing available. And then I will do what we call IWP scoping to see, well, okay, this CWP can be divided into, let's say, 100 installation work package. And then when I decide how I shall divide this construction work package, I will put a schedule to tell the guys, look, I will be creating next week 10, the week after another 10, so that to show them how I'm releasing the IWPs. And then we keep on going step by step. But the most important part is when we start what we call the constraint clearance. What does this mean? This means that I'm making sure when this installation work package arrives to site, there is no obstacle that stop the guys. Example of those obstacle, material, for example. Will it arrive on time? Will it be available? Then I make sure that I book this material for this IWP, so when they want it, they can pick it up. I want to make sure, for example, do they need any special permits, any special method statement? It's all clear before we get there. And notice the last step, which is include QVD. QVD are quality verification documents. So these are the QC form that are placed inside the ITPs in the construction. So also these are included as part of the element. Let's go to the next step. Next slide, Cha. Okay. Now, we have worked on various type of projects, from civil construction to building. This is an example of a mining project where you can see the various division of this mining project that we have worked on and we have implemented AWP on. Next. Now, as you noticed earlier, I talked about the AWP as an overall, and there is a smaller part which was the work phase planning, which only covered the construction part. Now, in the work phase planning, we can see that the purpose here is we need to make sure that the people who work on site spend most of their time to do direct work. This is a small graph here. You can see the amount of time that a person spend on site when I'm talking about like a welder, a pipe fitter, a fabricator. How do they divide their work on site? So they spend out of the 10 hours work time, 5% for personal reason, 7% material handling, like, okay, well, I missed this part, I missed my glove, and so on. They spend 7% of their time to do it. Waiting time for the previous activity to finish, this is 14%. Travel time, if they missed anything, they have to travel back to the store to bring it, and so on, around 17%. To get their tool of equipment, like I don't know what's the situation, but normally in most of projects, when people go to lunch, they have to pack back their tools, put them in a safe place, and then when they come back, they have to take it. So this is around 19% of the time. And of course, depending on the harshness of the environment, they might take 10%. Like I know in Kazakhstan, this was way more than 10%, because every 1 hour, there should be 15 minutes, what we call coffee time, because of the cold weather. So it depends on the harshness of environment. But this tells you that those people only, out of the 10 hours, they have 3 productive hours. If by, let's say, minimizing the material handling, the tools and equipment, the waiting time, the travel time, if we can drive those down, it means the direct work will increase. And this is around 30%. So if you can just take few percentage from each and add it to the direct work, this is how you can get your 25% improvement in efficiency. Next. Now, the same applies to the foreman or the supervision. Now, why I'm emphasizing on this? Because if your supervision is not present on site to supervise the crew, quality goes down like crazy. Okay, efficiency goes down like crazy. It's very important to make sure your supervisor is on site. Now, most of the time, why he is not on site? Well, he is chasing crane, he is chasing material. He is trying to understand from the planning what he's supposed to do this week. They really spend a lot of time doing all of these activities, leaving them with only 1 hour to 2 hours just to spend it with their crew, supervising them and giving them their experience. Next. Okay, now when we talk about these, I just gave you most of, let's say, the issues and what we are trying to get. Now, if we want to go a bit to the level of detail of work phase planning, so we have a number of questions that need to be answered. Like, number one is, if I am a foreman on site and I have a crew, I need to know, when do you want me to do the job? And what is the scope of this job like? Okay, how many % I need to complete? What do you want me to do? What is needed? And most important is, if I promise you to complete a certain job, it needs to be clear and documented so that later on, if I don't do it, we will be able to know why I was not able to do it. And of course, we need to document the why. Like, okay, if I come at the end of the week and tell you, look, I could not finish installing those 5 spools because I have a crane breakdown. So I need to document that there was a crane breakdown. There was a bad weather. It was raining like crazy. I could not get to site. So this is very important to know why, because we're going to have KPIs later on the whys. Of course, very important also because we are doing all of these in one platform, the project executive and the owner executive will have a live status of their project. So let's see, when we talk about when is required, what do I need? Let's go to the next slide chart. So now in this case, when we talk about when is required, it means I need to have my schedule of work, the level 4 schedule that we are talking about, completely integrated in my AWP system. And here you can see every single activity, it is linked to the actual IWPs. And if you notice in the column which is called type, the second column, whenever you see ACT and between parentheses 1 in blue, if you press on this link using our platform, it will take you to the IWP. So they are directly interrelated. Next. So now this one gave me, start and finish date of the data. The next one is, okay, I want to know what's next or what am I supposed to do? So this is where the important part come into the picture, because you have your own IWP and you can see the table below. It is telling you by specific elements. So it will tell you, well, look, you need to install foundation A, foundation B, foundation C, or you need to build the structure bay, let's say between A and C. So you know exactly what you are supposed to do. And it doesn't only stop here, it will show you how you report the progress in a scientific way, which we're going to explore later. But this will give you an idea about what sort of level of detail you can get to when you are assigning job to your people. Next. So now, what do I need to do those? In order to be able to know what do I need to do those, the most important part is I need to know what isometric do I need, what material do I need, what equipment, and all of these stuff. Now, what we do is we integrate the ERP information into the 3D model, and accordingly, this is a small example. It shows you, for example, when your fabricator will deliver you the spools. So you can see, for example, by color, some of them will arrive in April, some of them in August, some of them in January. So you can know when each and every one of them is supposed to arrive just by looking at the model. And accordingly, you know if you will be able to achieve your IWP on time or not. Next. Okay. Also, we need to be able to always have access to the latest drawing. Many cases we have on site where people worked on superseded drawing because they were too lazy to go back to the office, print the new one. They did not have access to the latest drawing. Now with Autodesk CDE, because it's available on the cloud, we link your IWP directly to the actual document, and you know the revision. So the second the revision changed, you will be notified to know that you are working on an older revision. Next. Okay. Also, there is something which we've noticed many, let's say, implementer of AWP do. They concentrate only on the engineering and procurement part of things. So in other words, what they do is they make sure that the design provide the IFC drawing, the procurement provide the material, but they do not really
Hello,
concentrate on
Jay.
the construction part. Yes?
Hello, Jay. Can you just pause for a second? They had to change power sources here. Just pause for a second.
Okay.
Just pause for a second so that we can get the visual back up. Okay. Okay, it's coming. All right, Chair, you can carry on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I was talking about the constraints that most, let's say, of the AWP implementer concentrate on the part that comes from the engineering and procurement. But for some reason, they miss the part that comes from the construction. So what we did is we differentiate between constraint, which come normally from the owners, from the designer and from procurement, and what we call a readiness checklist. Now, the intent of this one, because from our experience, we notice many of the delay that happen on site is because people, they think they did some stuff, but at the last second, they remember they did not do it and they go running to do it. For example, safety-wise, right? In many of the projects, especially if we are talking about project for international owners, okay, you have to have a fire watch people available on the crew. So if part of your team, there is no single one that got the fire watch training, the safety will not let you start the job. So imagine you're going to do and execute a certain job and this guy is not there, you're delayed. You might have to stop the job till you find a person who have this or till you train your guy. Emergency response. Okay, for example, the modification team, and this is, by the way, is one of the biggest, let's say, source of safety hazard, because you must have an official team that do the modification, not to let everyone do them by themselves. I remember we had a fatality in Kazakhstan because one of the pipe fitter decided to cut the scaffolding himself without relying on a modification team, and nobody knew that he did this cutting and somebody fell from that small opening that he made. If you go, for example, to the QC part, you have to make sure that the quality control forms are available and know what do they need, and make sure that the second you finish your job, you have already booked the QC to come and check it so that you can close it and go to the next step. Method statement, organization, to know with whom to talk if you have an issue. All of these are some of the checklists that are very important for people on site in order to make sure they don't stop the job. Next. Okay, the other item is, okay. Now, in this page, what I'm talking about is the complete integration between the Blacksmith Soft workplace planning or advanced work packaging platform with ACC. So, for example, if you want to issue an RFI, okay, in many cases, you see companies, they have, okay, one software to manage the RFI, another software to manage the constraint, and so on. We are lucky because we have the Autodesk platform, because they manage both issues and RFI in the same platform. So we hook into them, and then the normal process of creating RFI is happening between the various team members. We take this RFI and attach it to the IWP that gets affected, and any modification on the status, we are notified, and accordingly our team knows if their work is delayed, what RFI is affecting it, or what constraint is affecting it. And you can see these two, let's say, a table that you can see, they are directly integrated with the ACC to make it a single, let's say, data environment that serve all purposes. Next. Okay. We also made sure whenever you want to report progress, to report it in a scientific way. because I've been on site, and in many cases, especially when it comes to the civil part of the site, you ask a person, how is the progress? He'll tell you, well, I finished 50% of the room. What is your progress? I finished 75% of the room. He keep on adding percentage, but you cannot visualize it. The scientific approach, we tell him, look, if you excavate, I'm going to give you 15%. If you do the form work, I'm going to give you another 25%. If you do the rebar, I'm going to give you 30%. So in this case, I know exactly what is the status of the progress, and I make my payment related to this as well. Next. Okay, let's go now to the what is promised. Now, what we made sure available in this platform as well is when we assign a certain job to a certain people on site, we use the concept of 3-week look ahead. So we will tell them, look, in the first week, you're responsible to do this, second week that, third week this, and it is like a rolling 3-week look ahead. So now what happens here? If we look, for example, these are a bunch of spools that this team need to install on site. What we told them is in the dark blue is what you need to do for next week. So those guys need to install the spool in place and do the fit up after they do the installation. Of course, after that, the team will have to leave and then the welding team will need to come. So this is where the, let's say, the non-dark blue, it's the cyan almost. So this is the color. Tell them what you are supposed to do next week. They come and do the welding. And after that, the support team will come and support it, which is on the third week. And that's how I can do my 3-week look ahead using this sort of tools. Next. So after all the crews agree on this sort look ahead, we provide them with one single Kanban chart. This, by the way, many people who use the lean construction approach, they use very similar approach. So this Kanban chart will tell them, okay, what you're going to do the first week, the second week, and the third week. And if you look at the bottom of the slide, it will tell you how much you are promising, which is in red, versus how much the schedule or the planning wants you to do. So if your red is much bigger than the blue, you are over promising. If your red is much smaller than the blue, as what's happening in the second week, it means you are not fulfilling the schedule and you're going to be late to deliver the project. Next. Okay, to report the progress back from site, there are many methods. Now, we had tried almost most of them. We use the mobile devices, we use the scanners, and we use the Excel sheet. But to tell you the truth, everybody loves Excel. I don't know why. So we allow them to export Excel, fill it up with the data, and then we re-import it back to the system to make sure it's always up to date. Next. Also, what we allow you to do is, especially nowadays, like scanner are not as expensive as in the old days, and working with them is not that difficult. So what we do is, if you go and do a scan to your site, all you need to do is take this scan file, the last file, and upload it to the CDE, to the Autodesk CDE. And our platform will read this information as a point cloud, and it will allow you to compare this view with the actual 3D view that is happening or taken from the model. So this will give you a good idea on what's happening, especially if we are not talking about a green field. If it is a brown one, where you have existing structure on site, this is a very useful tool in order to compare stuff. Next. Now, the efficiency, this is very important. To calculate the efficiency, you need feedback from site. Most of the site that I went to, if a foreman wants to show an appreciation for a worker, he will give him 2 hours overtime or 1 hour extra. So you end up not having an accurate data of what's really happening on site, because many of those hours are more or less like a bonus hour instead of being an efficiency hour. So what we do is normally we recommend you use these sort of gadgets which you put on the helmet of the people, and this will provide you the exact accurate man hours being spent on site, and accordingly your efficiency calculation will be more realistic and not dependent on the subjective approach of the foreman. Next. Okay, now we did what's promised. Now if I'm unable to deliver what I promised you, okay, I want to know why. So there are two ways of reporting the why. Either you can give them a way to key in those information, but we notice if we utilize what we call a reason code, it is better to be able to use later in reporting format. So that's why any activity that is not completed on time, you can add the reason for this, and it will be saved in your platform to be able to use it later on for reporting and KPIs. Next. Okay, so now I'm just going to go through some of the report that comes directly from the system without the help of any Power BI, but of course, it can be linked to a BI platform as well. So this is one, which is a look ahead schedule. It can show you on the spot if people are working out of sequence, if they are under committing, over committing, and also it will show you if they are reliable when they promise. You can know the commitment reliability. Next. These are the S curves. We can change the color of your model depending on various properties and attributes. So some of them, like in this case, is progress related. So anything that's green in this model is completed. If you see something yellow, it means it's 75% progress. If you see something blue, it means around 50%. And if you just started working, it will be orange. Next. The report to the left-hand side is what we call the skyline report. This is actually a very important report because it gives you an idea about the congestion on a specific area. It will give you an idea whether the way you are planning your project, do you need a proper, let's say, did you have a proper manpower normalization or not? All of these can be highlighted by looking at this sort of report. And every one of those rectangle that you see is hyperlinked to the actual data, so you can view the full detail accordingly. To the right-hand side is actually the schedule from a AWP perspective. So every line item here is an actual IWP. Next. Okay, because we have these data, we were able to produce a number of reports. Like here, you can see, for example, in the pie chart below, that around 27% of the cases of the delays is related to equipment breakdown. Now, for example, a manager will go and drill down to see which specific equipment. Maybe a certain brand is not doing well in this case. You have sometime lack of manpower. We can drill down to see why lack of manpower. Did I give people vacation I'm not supposed to? So all of these can be directly viewed by looking at this data. Next. Okay, this one will give you an idea about the commitment reliability of your team. So if a person always promise a lot and do not deliver, you know that this guy is not dependable. If a person always promise a little but he finish a lot, it means this guy is very let's say conservative, and maybe you can give him or ask him to do more work and so on. Next. Well, I'm done. If you would like to contact me for any additional information, you can always scan this barcode. Thank you all. If you have any question, I'm available.